Look at us with a sweet intro, executed like a bunch of monkeys, but still, we got there. So, welcome everybody to the show. I'm sure I'm speaking to Dare at the moment, but hopefully, some people join us soon. I'm Nobodome. I'm joined once again by the wonderful haircutted Joe. Joe, say hello.
Great. Hey, how's it going, everyone? Joe.
So, this is our third show. We're going to talk about some things about the best game. We'll get to that in a little bit. But first, I don't know if we're a conquering champion or just a well-lessoned, learned individual. But Joe, you went on an adventure last weekend. How'd that go?
I did. I went to Motor City Mayhem in Detroit, Novi, Michigan. I brought Hail of Doom, Craft World Eldar. It did not go as well as I had planned, but yeah, I took some pictures. Overall, I won my first 3 games on day 1, and then lost my 3 games on day 2. So.
Oh, well, 3-3 is not bad. What'd you lose to?
Turns out Desolators are a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah, especially when you're playing Eldar.
Yep, and Guard as well. So
okay.
Yep, I played World Eaters game 1. That was my first time ever playing into World Eaters.
They score points real good.
They do. Let's see. How do I do this?
There we go.
Yeah.
Look at them beautiful Eldar.
Thanks. Let's see here. Okay. I played against Ryan, who actually was a really great opponent. Well, actually, all my opponents were, but he came back several times throughout the tournament to check in on me, see how things were going.
Sweet.
So this tournament uses Games Workshop format. This is the layout 2. There were some issues with that later on, which I will touch on, but
sure.
So layout 2, we did just the ARCS missions in order. So this is mission 11, recover the relics. So yeah, I had never played against World Eaters before. I knew they could move really fast before the game starts, and he did have that guy. Mr.
Of course he had that guy. Everyone has that guy.
Yeah, Lord Invocatus.
Yes. Lord Auto Include, as I like to call him.
Yeah. Ryan took, he had Blood for the Blood God, Pile the Skulls, and then he took Grind Them Down. I took Warp Ritual, Behind Enemy Lines, and Scout the Enemy. And I believe I went first this game. So this is my deployment. I hid like a coward. I measured out. Yeah. I measured out exactly where he could get to if he went first. So I had 2 Wave Serpents, just kind of screening the front. So if he was going to slam into something, he would just hit my transports. Here is Ryan's deployment. His list was basically just all of the 8-bound that you could take and like 3 units of Berserkers, 5-mans. He had 1 Chaos Helverin, or I can't remember what they're called, Executioners. He had 1 Executioner, 3 Rhinos, Demon Prince, and Lord Invocatus. Cool. So he, he pushed up pretty hard. Actually, I think he went first, now that I think about it. Yeah, let's see. So here we go.
Oh, with the play-by-play.
Yeah. Well, after
for those, if you're on a podcast, if you're listening on the podcast, there are some wonderful pictures with some very elegantly drawn circles and arrows showing the progression of bloodshed.
Thank you. This is MS Paint at its finest.
Nice.
So, so I moved up a little bit. He threw everything he could at me. His Demon Prince came up right in front of all my bikes there, and he was completely obliterated. I did pick up 1 of the Rhinos and the Berserkers inside, but I didn't have enough for the 2nd Rhino. The circle in the middle here, with the wall with all the holes in it, there are like 10 8-bound behind that, which came There's some more 8-bound directly above that, and then Lord Invocatus is poking his head out at the very top of the red circle there. So he just slammed into me. It was absolutely horrible. This Night Spinner, you can see that Lord Invocatus charged. I have no idea what happened here between him, and he also had like 5 8-bound with him. That Night Spinner took 2 damage. I don't know what happened.
All right, so
Yeah.
so it went poorly for the World Eaters, and I assume the clapback from your low number of shots was just
he was
untenable.
all the way out there. I picked up quite a bit. Pretty much from here, all of the army just kind of swung around the bottom of the board into his deployment zone, so I could start scoring my secondaries. And I just kind of kept him at arm's length. That hero of a Night Spinner just hung on for like 2 turns, just taking damage, not really doing much other than that. But Lord Invocatus got down to 1 wound when he was alive, and all I had left in the deployment zone were these 3 D cannons, which then charged him because he was jinxed. So.
Oh no.
Yeah.
So
they did not succeed, sadly, but they were toast anyway. So I figure I might as well just try to lock him down at least, so he can't charge me next turn, which did happen.
All right, so you went through the World Eaters, and your next 2 rounds went well. So since we don't have a ton of time, let's hear about one of the games that didn't go so well.
Yeah, we'll just jump to game 4, which is
okay.
So I played World Eaters, Salamanders, Guard, and then on day 2, Guard, Space Wolves, and Orcs. So let's see. This is game 4 against Jason. This picture is kind of far away. Again, so here's the issue with the terrain. It was Games Workshop terrain format 2 for every game except this one, which was Abandoned Sanctuaries, so Dawn of War deployment, and they switched it to format 3, which I had never played on before, which was very, very bad. I literally couldn't hide anywhere, so I have like the 1 ruin in my deployment zone, and then this little tiny ruin on the left-hand side. He went first. I did the only defensive thing I could do. I just phantasmed both Night Spinners and my bikes off the board because they were just going to die to mortars and Layman Russes, which apparently can move 12 plus D6 and just count as stationary still and do everything. So
good.
Yeah, here's his deployment. He's got everything kind of crammed up in here. He's got a Rogel Dorn, 3 Russes, a bunch of infantry, and some Kasserkin. So he pretty much just threw everything on the left-hand side here. The Kasserkin teleported right into my deployment zone and just obliterated my D-cannons and characters that were over here. Yep. And I was able over the course of like 3 turns to kind of clear out this left flank, but it was just too far gone at that point with the primary, and he did end up winning by about 10 points, like 92 to 82. So kept it close.
The firepower out of Guard is truly impressive sometimes.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Like what I could have done differently with the terrain. There's absolutely nowhere to hide. I tried keeping stuff out of the board. I don't know.
Sometimes playing against Guard on bad terrain is literally just like standing in front of a hurricane, right?
That's gonna get and
unfortunately, elves are made of toilet paper, so that's also a problem.
The finest Sylvan toilet.
The finest 1-ply.
Yeah.
So you did really good day 1, and you ran into day 2. You got humbled by a problematic terrain and probably a variety of bad matchups. What were your next 2 games? What were your other 2 losses against?
I don't have pictures of those games, but
that's fine.
Space Wolves, which was every jump pack you could possibly take.
Of course it was.
Yeah. He had like 500 points worth of free war gear with Meltas on everything and Lightning Claws, and And to my credit, I got like 23 out of his 25 jump pack troops before they reached my deployment zone, but it still just was not enough. And then he just crammed me in there the rest of the game, and I couldn't get out. And that's pretty much, we were both almost completely tabled by the end of the game. So.
Oh no! All right, so you went 3-3. How'd you do on Hobby Track?
I'm not sure. We didn't end up getting rubrics. Like they posted the best overall scores at the end. I did come in like 18th, but that was just due to, I mean, pitiful battle points at that last game against Orcs. I scored like 25 points. It was real bad.
Sure. So on your road to your first best overall, you got into 18th place. 18th out of how many?
Like 150 or 70, somewhere in there. So
gotta say, it's not first place, but it's not first place, but 18 out of 160 ain't that bad, sir. That's a good start.
Thanks.
Was there some lessons learned? Obviously, this is probably last event for you for 9th.
Almost certainly, yeah.
But carry on lessons learned.
When orcs and space wolves are coming at you, you need every gun you can muster to put down as much as you can to just kind of clear out an area and then run away. But sometimes you just can't get away fast enough. So.
Indeed, the old defense by bullets strategy.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So I haven't got to play recently. I mean, I played a game yesterday. I played dust the rust off Knights game into Eldar. The game was over basically on turn on the bottom of 3 with like, I think I was at 33 secondary points, and my opponent was at 0, or 33 primary. My opponent was at 0, and I was basically on track to max primary and all my secondaries. But that was just in prep for, there's just like a, limber up match because we have teams this week, which will be our last 9th edition game for Aegis, and then we'll be rolling into 10th. Meanwhile, I'm doing a fun hobby project with my daughter, as well as I'm doing kind of a neat pass the time project that I'll probably talk a little more about as shows go on.
Okay.
Let me grab the slide deck, and I just got 2 pictures to show. You'll like the first one. At least I think it's the first one, which is my daughter's Eldar.
Oh,
actually, no, the first one is the other project, but I'll show you. Okay, so let's add to stream. Boop, we'll do the other one.
Those are not Eldar, sir.
These are Eldar.
Okay.
The picture got all stretched out wonky, but so this is my daughter is doing a Wraith Construct army for her first army for 10th edition. She's doing it via Slap Chop as well as some Turbo Dork glazes. So what's kind of cool is all the silver glare is actually just Turbo Dork 40 glasses over white a bunch of times until it builds up a really nice glare. And so she did that essentially for the faces. She slap chopped the models and then left the faces white from the zenithal, and then just went over the white a whole bunch of time with thanks guys. Yeah, she's really proud of him. A whole bunch of times with 40 glasses. She did a little bit of highlighting with some silver. I helped her with gems because it's kind of a fine detail thing. Sure. And the model that's not in here that she's most excited about is she's currently building and painting a Wraith Knight. And all together, we'll have about 2,200 points as far as 9th edition points go. So we have a bunch of characters to switch in and out depending on what she wants to do. But she's going to start with a list that's basically 20 Wraith Guard, 2 Wraith Lords, Wave Serpent, some characters, and a Wraith Knight. And that's what she's gonna learn on. Small number of data sheets, hopefully tough models, hopefully mean guns. And I think Fate Dice are just like, well, I'm sure they're good for all the experienced players. I think Fate Dice is like custom built for the 10-year-old learning 40K.
Nice.
Because I get to just have the results I want. And of course, we're going to...
Cheating at a dice game is really powerful.
Yeah. we might switch in a squad of Guardians just so she can keep getting a die. And then we're definitely, if we can run 2 Farseers, we're going to do that so we can count some things as 6s.
Awesome.
And generally, I think, yeah, it turned out pretty good. And then I'm kind of biding my time. So I painted this to tabletop standard like 2 years ago for my cousin. My cousin hasn't really played since. He sent them back with me when I went and visited him. These are red scars. It's like white scar models, but like it's got the con but painted red. And so I'm going to go through and document my process of up leveling them from like base tabletop. I didn't even wash everything. Like it's just to the most basic level, very basic highlights. I'm going to go through and I'm going to do weapon glow. I'm going to do a bunch of glazing highlights. I'm going to do a bunch of up leveling on the metallics. I'm going to add some OSL to the plasma guns. I'm going to, just do all the way to the 9s as well as battle damage on the armor. And I'm going to document the process as we go. So I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Awesome. I see you did not go with the stock standard flight stands for the Inceptors.
No, all my Inceptors are literally just like drop kicking orcs, which I think is an Inceptor in its truest of forms.
Okay.
I think what we call that is dynamic entry.
Yes. Very good. Well, that's awesome. It's good. And I'm sure it'll end up even better.
Yeah. To the comments, yeah, she's gonna surpass me. She keeps on it. She's really creative and she likes, the art aspect of it, and she likes to play too. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, cool. So moving on to the wonderful world. Well, we have 10th edition looming in the distance right now. I'm pretty excited. We're supposed to get a lot of information over the next couple of days, given there's some exhibition matches. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Regardless of what edition we're playing, there is this concept that I've talked about a couple times with people about the idea of the best game of 40K. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because today is a people-focused episode. And then next episode, we're going to hopefully talk to Kazra, and we're going to talk about tuning lists and performing the best you can with what you got. But today, we're going to talk about the best game. So we're going to open in question, Joe, if you had to define the very best game of 40K, like you playing the best game, you participating in the best game of 40K, you have had the enjoyment to be one of the opponents in, how would you describe that game?
One that's really laid back, helping each other, just being friendly, not getting upset. Might be giving each other some tape backs here and there, because you're just trying to keep things casual. So I would say that. Casual,
but within the 3-hour time limit.
Yes, very much.
Not casual and
still recommended.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's pretty close to me too. I think for me, it's definitely the casual level. It's definitely, casual but competitive, right? So it's like we're both trying to play the best we possibly can, but there's not tension, aggression. No one's trying to get one over on the other person. We're trying to both make the best reasoning given the situation, and we're having very open communication. I think the other thing is like there's got to be some humor, some laughter where, sometimes dice go bad, we're laughing. Sometimes dice go good, we're laughing. I think that it feels like having a, friendly relationship while kind of playing out the most competitive, tight game of 40K we can play together and helping each other keep it tight, right? There's sometimes where you see someone because they're flustered or tired or something, just do something that is completely makes no sense and is walking into a gotcha. And I think, we'll touch on this, but I think that collaboration plays a key point. And walking away from the game, whether you win or lose, and feeling like you got a productive, enjoyable experience and don't have any like crazy feel bads or, a resentment or anything like that. I think that's for me the best game of 40K.
Yeah.
We got to see. Best game of 40K is like a fencing match where there are thrusts and parries back and forth. That's from our dear friend, Mr. Ryan Hamar, the Hammer Pattern Tech Priest himself, and I would very thoroughly agree. So, okay, so our best game of 40K. So the goal is to play our best game of 40K every time. Part of that is like, that's one of the goals, right? Play the best game of 40K. But the other, there's other goals when you come to the table. And I think that might impact sometimes like the quality of the game for both of us. For like, if, you and I are playing each other, we're playing someone else. So when you come to the table, Joe, what are your goals? Like, what is the goal set in your mind, other than obviously win the game, but like, what do you have as like priorities? What are you thinking about?
I mean, I definitely want to try to do the best that I can, both, like knowing that I made, I didn't make any huge errors, and, I like to come up with a game plan before and hopefully try to stick to it. But I would like to, afterwards the game, kind of like sit down and just kind of take it apart and see what I did right and did wrong. But obviously, have a good time with your opponent too. Yeah.
For sure. So your goals are do the best you can, play a tight game, and get along with your opponent.
Yeah, definitely.
So that breaks down into some things, right? I feel like there's some social contracts that surround that. And for what's worth, those are my goals too, right? Play the best game I can. But part of mine is also, this sounds weird, but like part of my goals when I come to the table is to ensure that my opponent has the appropriate space and support to achieve their goals at the table as well. Right. So sometimes in our, in this hobby, there are people who are maybe a little more reserved. There are people who maybe are a little more timid. There are people who are a little more aggressive, depending on the kind of person they are. And one of my goals is to try to get an understanding of the kind of person that I'm playing against, as well as the kind of game they're looking for, and try to make the game and the experience as tailored to that as possible, so that we both walk away feeling that we've kind of had a mutual compromise of a game with enjoyment that like leads on. That's not always possible because some people are very, very having fun, but which I don't understand why we do that and play this game. But most of the time, I think it's something you can achieve. So that goes into another part, right? So we have all these conditions for that having happened, right? So some of those conditions might be don't make some terrible mistakes. Some of those conditions might be polite and professional when you're talking to people. How do you communicate? Like, how do you lay the groundwork and discuss with your opponent what your goals are, or do you at all?
You mean like before the game starts?
Yeah, like what's that? I mean, a lot of people have a spiel, right? Have a something they say about their policy on takebacks, the kind of game they want, how they play. Do you have something like that? Do you have a way you communicate to your opponent to show like the kind of interaction you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of would just feel it out. I usually obviously start with like, hey, have you played against my army, whatever I'm playing at the time? And I'll go through, I'll just flat out tell them any of the crazy stuff I can do. Like these guys can aspect scan 18 inches. This guy over here can fly around the board after he does something every time. This guy can come back to life. I mean, Eldar, for example, I'll quickly explain how fate dice work, and
sure.
And then they usually do the same. And through that, just that brief interaction, you can kind of judge a lot just by how your opponent is socially, just how forthcoming they are or not forthcoming. So I'll usually just go from there. If I think they're really nervous, I will definitely try to be, well, I mean, I'll try to be open about everything I'm doing anyway, but just make it very clear, like what each unit is doing. Like if I'm doing Warp Ritual or something, I'll say this guy right here is doing Warp Ritual. That's my secondary. He's scoring me victory points right here. Would you care to interrupt, or do you have a deny? Something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So some prompting, some discussion. Yeah. Do you think you change the way you approach it, whether when you walk up to the table and it's either, let's say, a recognized killer, you go, obviously, so maybe probably a nice person, but, you walk up to the table and there's, there's John Lennon, there's Thomas Ogden, there's, some variety of people who are very obviously well-versed in the game and, kicking people in the teeth all the time. John Lennon does it incredibly politely, I should add, but still kicking people in the teeth all day long. Versus like, you show up and there's the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed brand new recruit with his brand new shiny sword and his brand new shield ready to have some fun. Is your approach different depending on kind of what you're reading off the individual?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if it's like a really well-known player who I know is like a professional, I probably won't have to divulge as much because they'll just know already. Or
Sure.
And obviously they're used to playing at a more professional level, so they've sort of got the contract, as you mentioned, kind of down already. So I'll just kind of I probably won't prompt as much, and they'll just know what's going on. I'll also know, well, to the best of my ability, what's going on, and just go from there.
So what about the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, brand new recruit who's about ready to walk into a wall of bullets?
Yeah, that is, like I said, I will definitely prompt a lot. Like, hey, these bikes over here do a ton of damage. If you let them shoot you all game, they will most certainly pick up half your army. So, FYI. Or these tanks over here have 48-inch indirect, which can ignore
freaking night spinners, man.
Yeah,
freaking night spinners.
Should ignore cover. So can ignore cover and hit modifiers. So FYI, you need to do something about those, or they're just going to start picking you up for free. So yeah, I'll definitely be prompting a newer opponent to just kind of give them a heads up of what the big threats are and where my scoring is going to be coming from, so they at least can have a hand in the game.
What about in terms of like their emotional state, right? Sometimes they come up the right bush hill, but they're very worried. They're very sometimes they've just come off a loss and they're kind of down. Do you take any personal responsibility for their current emotional state, or are you just like making sure you're polite, professional, and providing information, or you're just rolling forward?
Oh no, I'll definitely see if they're having a bad time. Like, hey man, I see you're a little upset or you're frustrated. What can I do to help you out right now? Is there something I'm doing? Is there something I can explain better to you? And usually that kind of like will break through the tension a little bit to some degree, but I don't know. Sometimes people just get frustrated and there's really not terribly much you can do about it, but I'll make an attempt, obviously.
Cool. At Cherokee Open, I had this really amazing opponent, actually a really great dude. I just recently saw, I think he won a golden ticket actually recently at one of his events. I think this was his first big tournament he was at. And I think in a tournament recently, he just won a golden ticket, I think.
That's
his
awesome.
name was Kyle, I'm going to butcher his last name, Trayah, Trayah. He's playing Demons. He came down the table. He just come off a loss, and he was a little, I think, nervous. He's a super great painter. Army looked amazing. We geeked out about hobby a bunch, but he was a little nervous, and I kind of assured him like, hey, I've played against Demons. Hey, the goal is I'm not going to let you walk into any crazy gotchas. Let's just chill out. He struggled with his secondaries a little bit initially. We talked about it, and we just like sat down and had like a conceptual talk about what his approach should be. He chilled out super like rapidly after that, and then he played like a killer, and I almost lost to him. He just played like it was like a stone cold like sniper, which was great because he was approaching the game a little bit of nerves, a little rattled, but still they're gonna have a good time. He was a little quieter guy. And then, once we broke that kind of barrier of nervousness and we saw that we were both kind of committed to a good quality game, we were collaborating well. We were like anticipating, oh, you're trying to do this? Okay, let me help you out. Okay, let's move this building to let's make sure how you're placing your terrain is correctly. So let's make sure there's no gotchas. It was a very collaborative game from that point on. But I don't think if I would have taken the approach of like kind of reaching out and be like, hey man, don't worry about it. We're gonna have a good one. I think it would have been a much less enjoyable game on both sides, right? I would have just been kind of trying to play around what would seem like a little more kind of quiet, tense, emotional feeling. And he'd probably have no idea whether or not I'm just a jerk bag or whatever. So I think taking a moment and even though it's not necessarily anybody's like required to, take a moment to take some responsibility for the emotional state of the, shared environment together is I think something that like we should do as players, especially if we feel competent to do it. So I totally agree.
Sure.
So we talked about best game, how we define our best game. We talked about goals and communicating that, discussing it. So this is okay. This is like a little bit of this can be a sticky subject, right? So we're having our discussion. We've communicated. We've gotten past the nervousness. Depending on, let's say we're playing against who we think is evenly matched player. We're playing against someone who we believe is of equal skill set and capability, and we're having a game of equals, right? That's what we feel like. How do you balance the thought process between and what's your balance in the mind of between killer instinct and empathy, right? So there are, gotchas is a very obscure term. It can mean different things to different people, right? And sometimes someone makes a decision, regardless of how well informed they are, that the decision is bad, that you can capitalize on to, game ending effect. Right. So for you, where's the line between killer instinct and empathy?
I guess that is a sticky subject. Definitely.
It's very sticky.
Yeah.
Covered in sticky for sure.
I think if it was deployment and, I can see part of a unit sticking out, they clearly meant to hide hey, bro, I can see that. That part of your tank right there, might want to bump it a little bit. But I think once you start moving pieces, though, I don't know, that game against the Space Wolves player, he moved his. I started back enough to where the Desolators couldn't hit me, and so he had to move out of his ruin, and 2 of them were sticking out the side of the ruin. So then the next turn, I just jumped some Dire Avengers out and picked up the whole squad because I knew those things were just going to table me. So I don't know. Is that the type of example you're talking about, or?
Yeah, it can be. I guess the defining there is whether or not there was a misunderstanding, right? Whether there's a tension, whether or not did he know he was exposing himself? Did he move into the position, and did you say, hey? And that's the other question. So he moves into a position. He moves into a position that is suboptimal. At that point, how do you approach it? He's not walking into a gotcha. He's just moving. He's making a decision that you see as being very bad, right? So I'm moving my very important unit into a position that is partially obscured from one angle, but definitely is going to get picked up because of your movement capability. Do you inform your opponent of that, or do you let him, if he doesn't ask any questions, you just let him place his model there and then accept the consequences later on?
Well, in that circumstance, I definitely let him make his move and then retaliated, and then he also retaliated by heroicing some wolfen into my Dire Avengers. So that
ouch.
that was a trade. But,
okay.
Yeah, I don't know. What would you have done in that situation?
It is hard. I think because of the kind of there's a lot of things that go in. I teach a lot I teach and mentor a lot in my day-to-day life. So I feel like I naturally fall into teacher mode, which sometimes is probably the most tactically advantageous maneuver. But I think that's okay because I generally resolve myself to being okay with that. But I feel like when someone moves into a position that I can see is truly looks not good, right? I will usually say, hey, what's your intent with that position? Or what are you trying to do? That's usually my first question. If their answer is, I want to make sure I'm hidden from those models, I'll say, okay, so you want to your intent is to be in this position so that I cannot get a line of fire on you with these models. And if he says yes, I'll be like, okay, so based on my movement, I definitely can. Do you still want to be there? I will usually say something like that, because if the intent is, if it's a misunderstanding issue, what I don't want is him to have, misunderstood what my movement capabilities were and then make a decision based on bad information. Now, obviously that's not always something we can do, and we're not really responsible for our opponent in that way. But I usually will ask, if I see something that seems just really wrong, what are you trying to do? And then I'll gauge kind of how much information I'm going to provide based on, and I never want someone to walk into like a capability they didn't understand. Like, they say something like, okay, well, my point is to be right here, so I'm out of heroic intervention. I'm like, well, that night heroic intervention 6. Like, oh, like I don't want ever someone to like think they're outside of heroic and then just get slammed by a knight or whatever, right? So it's a little bit of a hard position, I think, but for sure, I think my first question is just to ask what they're trying to do, and if it's obvious to me they're trying to do something that is either really, really bad or like not possible, I will convey them as much information as I feel like they should have, right? Like if they can't just know all my movement characteristics off the top of their head or whatever. So I'll try to be like, okay, my move is this, my range is this. I ignore these things. Okay, cool. So you make your decision, so then they'll ask me a question like, well, can you get a line? Well, yeah, I definitely can. Okay, moving on, right? So you're sure you want to be there? Okay, cool. Sounds good. And at that point, I'll let it go. If they're committed to the bad decision, I'm not going to say, I think this is a bad decision. I'm just going to say, what are you trying to do? And give them the information on whether or not they can achieve what they're trying to do.
Okay. Do you feel like there's a line here? Like at what point are you kind of playing the game for your opponent then?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? One of the best games of 40K I've ever played, 2 of them actually, both kind of actually were almost like me and my opponent were both playing both sides of the game. I played against a guy, Mitch. He's on Best in Tabletop. Me and Mitch played, my Grey Knights when I was playing 6 Grandmasters in Dread Knight armor back in the day.
Okay.
3 Brotherhoods, let's go. Against his I had 3 or 4 Dread Knights and a bunch of Telemons. Like it was the Telemon dance party, and we had a close game. I won. He won the first one. I won the second one, and because we played on 2 different occasions. But
Okay.
the game was very much like 2 people watching a thing, and then as the turn and priority shifted, us both kind of collaborating on what the optimal approach was. And then again with Tyler Bortel, and also I guess I've had similar games with almost everyone on the TNG group. Tanner's not on the podcast, but the Rose City Ruffians, as you would call them, I guess. Tanner and Tyler and Nick and Lucas. I feel like all of our games have been very discussing, collaborative, transparent, where we both are kind of resolving what we know is the optimal play given each evolving situation and then playing forward. And while I guess that might not be the game that everyone wants to play, for me, I think that those have been the most enjoyable.
Okay, awesome.
Because there were times where like I caught that, Tyler could have done a thing. I'm like, okay. And then Tyler caught that I could have done a thing. And then it also makes the later stages of the game where like things are coming down to single dice rolls and stuff really, easy. If like we both look at it and know what the optimal play is, we can sometimes resolve the current state pretty easily. Okay, well, only really matters is you roll a die. If you roll a 5, you win the game. Okay, cool. So we'll roll a die for the advance. We'll do the thing. And I find also when it's a collaborative level like that, it also avoids a lot of the tension. The problem, however, is when the feeling starts collaborative, and at some point someone gets a feel bad, and then it drops out. I've had that with people I didn't know very well. So I know all those TNG guys really well. I've had strangers who came to the table, very friendly, very good communication. We're playing kind of collaboratively. I'm pointing things out for them. They're pointing things out for me. Very nice. And then I start to gain the upper hand of the game. And then maybe, something happens and I have a very good turn. I'm playing knights usually lately. So like, a very good turn and they just like destroy, a third of his army, whatever. And then the feelings change. It's no longer a collaborative game. Now this person is upset of the position they're in. And the collaboration goes to very hard, hold you accountable to every move. You took your hand off the piece kind of play. And at that point, that's, I think, leads into our next question. Like, how do you handle tension? So, if at any point in the game the tension arises, what do you do?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's that's
me and the sticky questions
man.
today, bro. Me and the questions today.
I don't know what did you do in that situation?
I mean, in all those situations when if the tension is rising from a fundamental change in attitude at the table, I usually just call that out. So, like, I'm usually something to the effect of, "Hey, we've been playing in a really friendly, collaborative, by intent way this entire game. I noticed that after my last turn, that changed abruptly, and you're now holding me accountable for things where earlier I had given you leniency and you had given me leniency. So I'd like to ask, it seemed like originally our agreement was that we were going to, there was an unspoken agreement. We were playing a very socially collaborative, friendly game. It seems like that has changed. So would you like the overall way that we're playing the game to change? If so, let's make sure we cover that. Are we now playing no longer by intent? Are we playing by strict, as is action? And are we playing in a way that's the intent is to capitalize on each other's mistakes and not inform each other of when decisions are suboptimal? If I word it that way, that usually gives them a moment to be like, oh shit, I have messed up. This is about it. Because like if you hear that spiel, what you're hearing is, oh, this guy's asking me if we're about to play a cutthroat game. And usually the person who is kind of moving into that cutthroat mode is the person losing, or the person who is somehow having a negative experience. That's usually the person who starts trying to be overly advantageous, right? It's usually not the winner who's trying to pull all these threads and try to capitalize on tiny mistakes. The person who is usually in the power position is usually pretty relaxed, at least what I've observed. And so when you get that spiel, I think there's a moment where you have to just where they have to kind of assess, can I take this guy and can I win this game in the all no holds bar, blood in, blood out? Can I do this? And I've had at least one person say, yeah, I'd like to play, we're going to play just strictly as is. I was like, okay, cool. And they held me to a very debilitating game mistake I had made. I had forgot to move a piece. I asked if I could went back to make it. He said no. I was like, okay, cool. Sounds good.
Wow.
He ended up destroying the piece, and then I tabled him on the next turn to the man. I played as extremely friendly, but still extremely by the book to the highest possible level I could, with absolute no quarter given, and with the full intent of not scoring points myself, but just driving his score as low as possible. Normally, when I play my games, I don't actually care about my opponent's score, which is not great. I mean, it means I do lose a game now and then, to it. But I usually just play to maximize my score. And I find that actually usually results in much more friendly games, because my opponent is scoring very high, I'm scoring high, and I just try to keep it I want to win by a couple points, 10 points, 15 points. I usually don't want to win by 30, 50 points. I'll do that in practice games, but I usually am not trying to do that. If I'm playing against someone of, comparable skill or better skill than me, I usually can't, win by a million points anyway. So whatever. But when I switch on that, bloodthirsty switch, it can it's not really the way I like to ever have my brain space be. But that's the one time that wasn't. And usually they were like, oh no, I was wrong. Let's be gentle. Okay, cool. There was a guy I played in 8th. He's actually really great dude. But we had a moment. There was basically a tense moment where a mistake was made on his behalf. And he could, and we kind of moved past the state. And he realized he messed up, but the game state was in his favor. And if that mess up would have been retcon, the game state would no longer be in his favor. Neither of us caught it. We moved on. And when he realized that, I said, you know what, man, it's up to you. Whatever you're happy with in your conscience, I'm good either way. You just play the way that you're comfortable with, and we can either keep it or not. And I find that maybe this is giving too much of my hand when I say it like that, play whatever way is good with your conscience. Usually people end up being much more merciful with their decisions.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, what was the circumstances of that? Was this early in the tournament? Was it later on? Were you both undefeated?
It was round. So it was an RTT. It was a long time ago. It was an RTT. It was round 2. We had both won round 1s. We both had max battle points. Whoever won that game was going to go on and play for first place for sure.
Okay.
And I won that game, and I did go on. But basically, what it would have been is I had a model that would have been alive, a unit of anti-tank models that would have been alive. And if they would have been alive in that situation, he would have lost his Lord of Skulls.
Mm.
Because of the misplay, the unit was not alive, and neither of us caught it. And as we got to near the end of my turn, and it was about to be his turn, he realized what had happened, and he told me. I was like, he's like, "What do you want to do?" I'm like, "Man, it's up to you, man. If you want to leave it as is, that's okay. Whatever you're good with. We both missed it, so it's up to you." And he hemmed and hawed about it. He decided to roll a dice. I said, "Okay, cool." He rolled a dice, and it came up in his favor. And then he started his turn, and then just shook his head and was like, "I can't do it, man. I can't do it." And so he retconned it in my favor. And
Wow.
that dude has beat me many a time before that. So like it was good. But like he's a solid dude. But it was like, sometimes if you just let someone, process it, people I like to believe that people are naturally, genuinely good. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, you have probably different perspective on life given your life experience. So I understand that I'm insulated. Yeah, I know. So what about you? So tension for you.
Yeah, so that's good. I'm glad you pointed that out about how just kind of like being very upfront and addressing when things start to get uncomfortable. I think that's probably the correct way to go about handling the situations. In the past, I definitely, as soon as someone starts give me a little attitude, I'm definitely going to adopt a more rigid, all right, we're doing it this way, so I guess this is how it is.
Put on the work hat.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah. Also, I do want to just kind of say, like, especially with these talks on sportsmanship, Noah's obviously extremely more experienced than I am, and I'm still very much learning. So, with these talks, this is a learning experience for me as well. So I just want to put that out there.
And in the world, I would say, when you call me experienced, in the world of 40K, I feel like I'm not that. There are lots of people who are much more, versed and capable. I played a lot of different competitive games, so I also kind of extend my perception to I was a couple games shy of the Pro Tour, a couple times in Magic, kind of stuff. So I like competitive games, and I feel like those things transit. But I also just love tournaments so much, and I have the ability to travel to events often. So I just get exposed to it more. Not necessarily that I'm better at it. I just get exposed to it more.
Awesome.
Okay. Has there been a tension moment that just you could not de-escalate that just turned out badly?
Not with me. I definitely witnessed
the
table next to me.
All right.
2 years ago. One of my friends was just playing this other player, and it had something to do with the other guy had a 3D printed army, and I'm not sure. There was some misunderstanding about what pieces were what, and it literally was about 2 seconds away from coming to blows, and the player that was not my friend got ejected from the tournament and got a loss. So that
getting
was
punched by a 40K player is a very much a roll of the dice, because there are probably plenty of 40K players that are not, that are just, not that physically capable. But I know a few, if you pulled that with Anthony Vanilla and it came to blows, you might go to hospital. You know what I'm saying? He's a nice dude, but he might just punch you in the throat. And and he's good at it. He teaches other people how to punch you in the throat, right? So it's kind of a seriously large amount of intestinal fortitude to pick a fight or to progress to blows at a 40K event, because I just feel like the grab bag is just potentially entirely too dangerous.
Yes, definitely much.
Or you're not a slouch. Someone picked a fight with you, they probably they would regret it on multiple levels.
Well, I'd like to think so, at least. But
so okay, all right. So tension. On a moment of internal tension, I've seen a dude just straight up spike. I think I've mentioned this before. Just straight up spike an obelisk.
that is not a small model.
Not the obelisk. The other one, the monolith.
Okay. Also not a
Turn
smart
one
move.
of an event, dude shoots a anti-tank gun. This is an old 5th edition where there's like a exploding table at the thing.
Oh yeah.
She hits it, it explodes, and everything is in reserve, so that stuff can't come in anymore. Blows up and does mortal wounds to his whole army. Basically wipes out most of his army in literally one die roll. The dude picks it up and just spikes it into the ground and then drives away. Like went out and got in his really nice sports car and just drove away and left his models on the table.
Okay.
And so sometimes the tension has nothing to do with you. Sometimes people are just poorly managed. And the best you can do is just be polite and move on. And if you're very uncomfortable, get a judge.
Was the monolith painted?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I mean,
He
it's
was
like
really
old school,
upset.
It's old school Necron painting. So it's not like, it's just like dark colored green line.
Sure.
Okay.
Sorry,
so we got
Necron players.
I mean, there's plenty of beautiful Necron armies. I just think old school Necron players like really like dark paint green line for the vehicles. So okay, we talked about tension. Do you feel like your like mood, energy level, how you're feeling that day, like affects how good of a game you have, like with your opponent, how your opponent responds, and how you play? Like if you go in happy, high energy, in a good mood, do you feel like your games are traditionally just feel better and that your opponent has a better time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just this last tournament, I'm a little ashamed to say I got pretty dang salty by the end of the second day. Yeah, I was feeling real good the first day and high energy. Like I said, my first World Leaders opponent, we were just constantly checking in with each other after the first round, on the break, see how we're doing. They would put the pairings up, so if I had a little insight into what he was going into, I'd give him some heads up, like hey, these guys can do this, this, and this, and then and after that guard game, just ripping me to shreds in my deployment zone like that. Ooh, I started to get a little down in the dumps. My energy level definitely went down, and then then I got smashed by the Space Wolves, and then it was even further from there. And then the orc game was just real bad. And I mean, I have orcs, so I know what they do. I know exactly what was going to happen, and I still just couldn't avoid it. I tried to just swing over onto one side and just kind of, make a little hole for my army to hide in, and I still just got steamrolled. And by that, I was just really frustrated with myself. And I got done with finished the game, shook my opponent's hand, packed up my stuff. I was supposed to stay the next day, and I just was like, all right, I'm just done. I'm driving home. So.
Oh no. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I was feeling real pretty grumpy afterwards, which no fault of any of my opponents. It was just all internally me, just not too happy with myself. So I feel like I could have done better. But.
Do you think it's your responsibility to try to bring the best energy and attitude you can to the table, even if you're not feeling great? Do you feel like that's something you should be doing, that you're responsible for, or like
Sure.
or is it just like, hey, if you feel a way, you shouldn't feel the need to like candy coat how you feel to just so that someone else feels better about it?
No, I definitely. I mean, I do think it is your responsibility to try to, because everyone is there to have fun. And if you're not having fun, it's harder. And then your opponent's probably going to feel weird too, especially if they're stomping you. Because, I mean, at that point, we're not really playing for much anyway. If ever, having a couple losses under your belt. But, yeah, I think, I probably should have just taken some time to, go in between the rounds. I just kind of sat there, ate my lunch by myself, and I probably should have gotten
Panda.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about, what could I have done differently that game? I took some pictures. I was going back looking at, where I had moved. Should I not have moved there? Should I have gone after this instead? And I probably should have just gotten up, walked around, and socialized with my friends there, just kind of bring me out of that funk. So, and I felt ridiculous the next day after I'd kind of had, a 6-hour drive home to stew on it, and I felt pretty silly about it. So.
Yeah, I know it's hard. Like in the moment, it's hard to like sometimes do this, but ultimately, once the game is played and the dice are rolled and the bullets are fired, you can't unfire them. I've been guilty before of realizing there was a misplay or an issue, and then kind of feeling frustrated about that. Like if let's say opponent had a misplay and then it, led to them winning the game or something, and me getting kind of like overly focused on that before. But I try to like just say to myself, look, like I just have to let this go, right? If this game is causing me emotional stress and tension and conflict, and I'm that focused about like how well I did with some toy soldiers and some dolls, then I probably need to like reevaluate my priorities are. And usually when I have that like talk with myself, it comes out. Though I do think it's important to process your feelings. And if you get mad about something makes you mad, that's legit. Just because it's about a game, it's okay to be mad about a game. What I try to do, and so, I don't know, I think people talk about this enough, and I'm not trying to like bleeding hard on it, but I'm a vet and I have PTSD. And I also I'm also just like a human who lives through the world and deals with a bunch of stuff. And so I go to therapy. And talking to my therapist, I go once a week. It's fantastic. Talking to my therapist, she, as a dude specifically, I think a lot of people who aren't dudes probably experience this too. But there's sometimes if you feel responsible to not give yourself permission to be mad, or I have to do this because everyone else is depending on me or whatever. But I think according to my therapist and also my experiences, if you're mad, just take a minute and be mad. Just go do your thing, be pissed. Give yourself a time limit and then just let it go. Take your breaths if you can. Say, okay, I'm going to let myself be mad. Acknowledge I'm upset. I'm going to acknowledge that it was it's a valid emotion. I'm also going to acknowledge that it's not going to do me any good. And that if I'm mad going into my next game, I'm probably going to play worse. And then I usually try to go find somebody at the, whether it's a cool army that I want to ooh and ah at and distract myself, or somebody who I'm there at the event with. And I just try to focus on the positive and kick it out of my head and move on and then do the thing. Dust our shoulders off, keep on moving. So, okay, we're coming to the end. I guess all this wraps up into, and if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in. This all wraps into this idea of a good opponent. Right. So if you're a good opponent, it sounds like what we've kind of come to is that there's a level of personal accountability. There's also a level of clear communication, and there's also a level of shared responsibility for the enjoyment experience of the person across the table. Would you agree that's kind of integral to be a good opponent? And would you add anything to that?
I would not add anything, and I would agree at 100%.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was a super cool show. I think this was a good topic. We've done hobby. We've done, we did our intro thing. We've done hobby. We've done, now we've done this. Our next one is going to be competitive focused, about playing the best you can, even maybe when you have, let's say you're a faction specialist and your faction isn't doing that great. So you're playing the best you can with what you got, or you specifically want to play a army that you just had a hobby that might have some things. We're going to do that next. Cool. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, SB. And so, the next one we're going to talk, hopefully as long as you can still make it, we're going to talk to Kazra about, specifically, I thought he's great because he plays Ultramarines all the time, and sometimes Ultramarines are not in the best position. And then after that, we're going to hopefully have a show. We can try to get Jacob Thayer from Hobby Goblins on here, as well as maybe JT Steiger. And then the four of us are going to geek out about hobby and kind of, the replacing the word hobby with art, and the artistic side
awesome.
of the goodies and the mentality around that. Any closing words from you, Joe?
No, I just thank you for sharing that about with the therapy and everything as well. I thought,
I wasn't trying to get all super too exposed or emotional, but I just think it's something that sometimes we don't get the permission to have feelings. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, that is very important.
Sweet. Well, thank you, Joe. You're awesome. So if y'all have anything else, feel free to leave a comment. We love the chance to talk to y'all, and we'll see you next week. Well, not next week, week after next week. We're back on the every other week schedule because of Senior Joe and his life commitments. Silly man with a job and a life. Silly man. So we'll see y'all in 2 weeks. Catch you later.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.